Hey there, welcome to Lifepointe Youth Midweek Online. We are so excited that you decided to be with us or to listen in. We're really sorry that we couldn't be with you guys in person this week. I hope you guys had a fantastic day off. I hope you got the chance to enjoy some snow, maybe do something fun, hang out with friends and family a little extra. I know I got a lot of stuff done that day. And got to enjoy the pretty winter weather. So we're just so excited that you are here and that we get to connect in this way this week. And so I'm just really looking forward to seeing what Josh has for us tonight as we continue our conversation on what the Bible has to say about work and what it applies to our life today.
I remember being in high school, and I remember everybody asking me as I was approaching college, like, hey, where are you going to go to college? What are you going to do? You know, and those questions were always just around me. If you aren't a senior yet, prepare yourself because it's coming. You know, people are going to want to know, where are you going to go to school and what are you going to do? What are you going to study? And then what are you going to take that degree in? And what are you going to end up doing? You see, it's so important in the lives of the people around us, especially if you have your parents or your family. Like, they want to know what you're going to be doing. You see, I think that this thing reminded me of like why jobs are so important in the first place. Why is work in the way that we think of it? Why is it so important? Well, a lot of people think that it's the main motivation, it's the main focus in our life. There are some people, I guarantee you, who think that what you choose to do in your work, in your profession, in your career is actually the most important decision that you can make. We know that there's a few other ones as Christians, right? That we know that, like, man, this is actually more important. But I know that there are some people who are so driven by their work that they're like, hey man, this is the most important thing that you could actually do. And why is that? Because we live in a culture that values hard work, that values people working overtime, values money. We've talked about that before. Like, we live in a culture that prides itself on being busy and having all this work to do. But I think as believers, as Christians, as people who have put our faith in Christ, there's some things with work and with our jobs and with our vocation. I think that there are some things that we have to really work out here. And so I want to go into Matthew chapter 4, and I want to read about this interaction that Jesus has with the disciples for the first time as he calls them out. This is what it says in Matthew chapter 4, verses 19 through 22. He says, "Come, follow me," Jesus said, "and I will send you out to fish for people." And at once they left their nets and they followed him. Going on from there, he saw two other brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. They were in a boat with their father Zebedee, preparing their nets, and Jesus called them. And immediately they left the boat and their father and followed him. You see, I think the first thing that we have to understand in this shift of how we think of work is that our job actually isn't our job. You see, it's very possible that Jesus selected the fishermen as his disciples, not only because of the imagery of the occupation, right? Because they were going to be fishers of fish and then they were going to be fishers of men. Not only because of that, but because they were willing to work long hours. They were willing to work hard, tough hours and do really grimy and gritty work. You see, the character in which God is looking for is going to allow you to be able to be molded and shaped into the son or daughter that he wants you to be. You see, he has different gifts for different people. And you have to be able to have the character and the work ethic to be able to take those things, to be able to take what he's calling you into and actually be able to make it useful and to steward it well. You see, Jesus also wanted to point out that just as they were supposed to be fishers in their job occupation, that they were actually going to be fishers of men and reach people. This was going to be their obedience in following Jesus. It was shown in that. You see, John and James left their family. It was meant to, that thing there is meant to show that our obedience has to be immediate, and it doesn't matter what it's calling. If Jesus is calling you to something, if God is calling you to something, you have to be obedient to it. You see, Jesus chose the disciples to come out of the place that they worked, both figuratively and literally, and to start reaching people and witnessing to people across the region that they were in. See, they probably, if they were so stuck in their job, they probably would have missed out on the calling that Jesus had for them. You know, so much of our culture tells us and teaches us that we're supposed to clock out, we're supposed to work as hard and as much as we can, to do as much as we can, and then we're supposed to clock out, get some rest, and then come back and do it all over again. And it just becomes this cycle that can drain us. But if we can shift this, if we can allow Jesus to break in, he will always give us something more than just what we do in our 9 to 5. I'm not saying that work is not important, but we have a greater calling that we're supposed to adhere to and to listen to and to follow in. I want to read another passage in John chapter 21. This is at the end of John. Jesus has already gone through his death, burial, resurrection, all of this stuff, and the disciples actually have found themselves doing the same thing. I want to read this. This is what it says. It says, afterwards, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee, and it happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, we were talking about that already, and the 2 other disciples were together. I'm going out to fish, Simon Peter told them. They said, we'll go with you. So they went out and they got in the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not recognize that it was Jesus. He called out to them, friends, haven't you any fish? No, they answered. And he said, throw your net on the right side of the boat and you will find some. And when they did, they were unable to haul in the net because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, it is the Lord. And as soon as Simon Peter heard him say it is the Lord, he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and he jumped into the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing in the net full of fish, for they were not far from the shore, only about 100 yards. You see, I think that in these 2 interactions, we can grab that our job actually isn't our job. And we can also understand from this passage that our calling is actually more important than our career. You see, this week that the disciples had was just a crazy emotional week. They come in to Jerusalem with Jesus and they're welcomed in as royalty. I mean, these people worshiped Jesus so authentically and so real that they were like, oh man, we're on cloud 9. Fast forward just a few days later, and Jesus is being arrested and tried and killed and beaten and all of this. I mean, it's just insane. And they are running for their lives and they're scrambling around and they don't know what to do. And then Jesus actually dies. He's buried and he's resurrected again. And so then they meet him and they know that he's resurrected. They know they won. It's amazing. So much happens in this week. And it's so crazy to look at that. And so this is probably the reason that they were out there fishing. They were like, listen, I can't, I got to get my mind off of it. I got to do this. You know, Peter's like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to fish. I don't think that we can do this though, right? We can't let our emotions and our experiences dictate what we do for Christ. I mean, what would it look like if every time that we went on an emotional roller coaster or we had some mental thing that comes in to block us? Man, if we didn't do that, or if we walked away from our faith every single time and we just reverted back into what we normally do, I think that it wouldn't look very good to anybody else who's looking from the outside in. You see, we have to understand that our calling is greater than any emotion, greater than any mental barrier, greater than anything that we could ever see or have in our life. You see, Peter and the disciples, they went back to working the same time loop that we were talking about earlier. We're just going to go back and we're just going to revert back into what we know to do. They kind of walked without purpose. Why was this? Well, especially in Peter's case, he had denied Jesus. He had said, hey man, I don't know Jesus. He had said this 3 times and he was like, listen, I don't know. And so after this, he felt like he had let the team down. He felt like he had let Jesus down. And his guilt and his shame actually kept him from doing what Jesus had originally called him to do way back as we were reading in Matthew. You see, we can live in discouragement and end up being lost, not our salvation or anything like that, but lost in who we are in Jesus. We can lose our sight of our calling and we can actually be ineffective because when we revert back into just what we know without Jesus, man, it's never going to be effective It's never going to be meaningful. I mean, we're not going to be able to do anything on our own without that calling of Jesus. I just think that is so important to understand. You see, Jesus begins to restore Peter after this into a moment where he can actually step back into the calling that he had for him. You see, in the same way that Peter denied Jesus 3 times, Jesus actually asks him to affirm him 3 times. He begins to restore him. And at the end, he says, hey, I need you to go out and I need you to do this. I need you to go out and spread the gospel. I need you to reach people. And he's kind of reinstated. You see, you can't do this thing that Jesus is calling you into if you stay in the boat or if you go back to the fishing boat. And you have to be willing and able and ready for God to restore you when you fall and to keep giving you the encouragement and the energy to keep going when you're on the move. You see, Peter actually went and he preached the first message of the gospel after Jesus was ascended into heaven. He gives this first gospel presentation. 3,000 people were saved because of this. You can't do that if you're staying in the fishing boat. You see, there was more work for Peter and the disciples, now the apostles, to do. They were not done, and they were actually they were definitely not going to go back to working and go back to fishing without this greater purpose that they had. You see, it takes time, and it is time to get to the real work of reaching lost people in those different occupations, those different things that we feel like we need to dedicate our time to in work, as a job and as a career. But our calling as believers is way more important. So I want to just ask a simple question, and that is this: what are you distracted by? What takes you out of the game, and what puts you back into the same time loop of just clocking in, doing some work and leaving, and then doing it all again? You see, we're going to have certain jobs and things that are required of us, right? Certain titles, certain things. A lot of you guys are students, right? That's going to be something that you're going to have to do and walk out. But then there's this greater thing, even more than just being a student or just being an employee, and that is that we're supposed to reach people with the faith, the hope, and the love of Jesus. We're supposed to tell people about Jesus. Matthew 28:19 is the Great Commission. And it tells us, man, we are supposed to go to the ends of the earth to reach people, to disciple people, to love people, and to tell them about Jesus. Don't ever confuse your job or your career as being your purpose of why you're here and what you're supposed to do. Don't let your career get in front of your calling.